3 legendary American muscle cars, 1/4 mile, and only one winner. Today, we're lining them up on the drag strip to find out which classic muscle car truly owns the 1/4 mile. Starting at number 3, we have the Pontiac GTO, a car that didn't just participate in the muscle car era, but actually created it. Introduced in the mid-1960s, the GTO was never meant to be a race car on paper, yet it shocked the entire American auto industry by proving that raw V8 power in a relatively simple body could dominate the 1/4 mile. By the late 1960s, the Pontiac GTO was available with massive engines producing over 360 horsepower, and more importantly, huge amounts of torque. On the 1/4 mile, a well-tuned stock GTO could consistently run in the mid to low 14-second range, which at the time was incredibly fast for a street-legal car. What really made the GTO dangerous was its launch. The car pulled hard from the starting line and kept building momentum all the way to the finish. Drivers loved the balance between power and control, and that's why the GTO quickly became a favorite at local drag strips across the USA. Even though it doesn't take the top spot today, the Pontiac GTO deserves massive respect because without it, the muscle car war may never have started. Moving up to number 2, we have the 1970 Dodge Challenger, a car that looks like it was designed to scare its competition before the race even begins. The Challenger was bigger, wider, and heavier than many other muscle cars, but Dodge made sure weight wouldn't be an issue by offering some of the most brutal engines ever put into a production car. With options like the 446 pack and the legendary 426 Hemi, the 1970 Challenger was a true 1/4 mile weapon. In stock form, a Hemi Challenger could run the 1/4 mile in the low 13-second range, and with the right driver and conditions, even faster. The Challenger wasn't just fast in a straight line, it felt aggressive at every stage of the run, from the violent launch to the thunderous exhaust echoing down the strip. This car perfectly represents the golden era of American muscle, where manufacturers cared more about power than comfort or efficiency. Even today, when people talk about classic drag racing, the 1970 Challenger is always part of the conversation, and for good reason. But despite all its power and presence, there is one car that was even more focused on 1/4 mile domination. At number 1, we have the Plymouth Barracuda, famously known as the Cuda, and this is where things get truly serious. The Cuda wasn't just built to compete, it was built to win. Especially in Hemi form, the Plymouth Cuda became one of the most feared cars on the drag strip. With the same 426 Hemi engine but packed into a slightly lighter and more aggressive body, the Cuda had a major advantage when it came to acceleration. On the 1/4 mile, the Hemi Cuda could achieve low 13-second times and, under ideal conditions, even dip into the high 12-second range, which was absolutely insane for an early 1970s street car. The combination of brutal horsepower, shorter gearing, and better weight distribution made the Cuda a near-perfect drag machine. This is why today, the Plymouth Cuda is not only one of the most valuable muscle cars in the world, but also one of the most respected. It represents everything the muscle car era stood for: raw power, minimal compromise, and total 1/4 mile dominance. When we line these 3 legends up on the drag strip, the Pontiac GTO earns its place as the pioneer, the Dodge Challenger demands respect with its intimidating power, but the Plymouth Cuda proves why it is often considered the ultimate 1/4 mile king. Now the real question is, if you were standing at the strip and had to place your money on one of these machines, which one would you choose to race for glory? Number 2. Before the name Cuda ever became a symbol of fear on the drag strip, the 1963 Plymouth Barracuda entered the automotive world quietly, without the loud reputation or massive engines that would later define the muscle car era. At first glance, it didn't look like a 1/4 mile monster, but underneath its clean and simple design was a concept that would eventually change American performance culture. Built on the compact Valiant platform, the 1963 Barracuda focused on lighter weight, rear-wheel drive, and a balanced layout, all of which are critical ingredients for straight-line acceleration. In the early 1960s, most American cars were large, heavy, and designed more for cruising than racing, but the Barracuda hinted at a different philosophy. While early engine options were modest compared to later muscle cars, racers quickly realized that weight reduction could be just as powerful as horsepower. On the 1/4 mile, a stock 1963 Barracuda typically ran in the mid-15-second range, which may not sound extreme today, but at the time, it placed the car firmly among respectable street racers. What truly separated the Barracuda from many competitors was its responsiveness off the line. Thanks to its lighter body, the car reacted quickly when the lights turned green, allowing skilled drivers to get strong launches even without massive power figures. This made the Barracuda extremely popular at local drag strips, especially among younger racers and enthusiasts who wanted performance without the expense of full-size muscle cars. Another major advantage was simplicity. The 1963 Barracuda was easy to work on, easy to modify, and forgiving to drivers who were still learning the art of drag racing. Simple upgrades like better tires, gearing changes, and tuning improvements could significantly improve quarter-mile performance, and many racers used the Barracuda as a foundation for learning how to extract speed from a car. This grassroots appeal is a major reason the Barracuda earned respect long before it earned fame. Over time, as V8 options became more powerful and racing culture expanded, the Barracuda began to prove that compact muscle could compete with much larger machines in straight-line battles. The car wasn't winning races through intimidation, it was winning respect through consistency and potential. This early success planted the seed for what the Barracuda name would later become. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, when the legendary Cuda models arrived with massive engines and aggressive styling, the foundation had already been laid by this early generation. The 1963 Barracuda taught Plymouth a crucial lesson: quarter-mile success isn't only about brute force, it's about balance, weight distribution, and how effectively a car puts power to the ground. Today, collectors and historians look at the 1963 Barracuda as a beginning rather than a peak. Its value comes not from outrageous performance numbers, but from its role in shaping muscle car evolution. On the quarter mile, it represents the moment when American performance began shifting toward lighter, more focused machines. It reminds us that legends are not born overnight, they are built through experimentation, learning, and incremental improvement. When you imagine a 1963 Barracuda lining up at a small-town drag strip, you're not watching dominance, you're watching the birth of an idea that would eventually lead to some of the most feared quarter-mile cars in history. And that is why the 1963 Plymouth Barracuda deserves its place in muscle car history, not as a final champion, but as the car that helped start the journey toward quarter-mile greatness. As we reach the final part of this quarter-mile showdown, it's important to understand that these legendary muscle cars were never just about speed, they were about identity, pride, and an era where winning the quarter-mile meant everything. When the lights dropped at the drag strip, it wasn't just metal racing metal, it was brand versus brand, reputation versus reputation. The Dodge Challenger and the Plymouth Cuda didn't simply compete on paper, they fought for dominance in real-world conditions, where traction, driver skill, and raw mechanical power decided the winner. The Challenger brought unmatched presence to the strip, its long body and aggressive stance making it look like a heavyweight boxer ready to knock out anything in its lane. When launched correctly, the Challenger delivered explosive torque that pinned drivers back into their seats, and its thunderous V8 roar became a warning to competitors that this was no ordinary street car. Yet quarter-mile racing is unforgiving, and even small advantages can change the outcome completely. That's where the Plymouth Cuda continued to separate itself from the competition. With a slightly shorter wheelbase and lighter overall weight, the Cuda reacted quicker off the line, transferring power to the pavement more efficiently and gaining those crucial first feet that often decide drag races. In an era without electronic aids or traction control, this mechanical advantage mattered more than ever. Drivers knew that if a Cuda launched cleanly, it was incredibly difficult to chase down before the finish line. This reputation didn't come from marketing, it came from real results at drag strips across America. Over time, these quarter-mile battles shaped how enthusiasts viewed these cars, and that perception still exists today. The Challenger became the symbol of brute force and intimidation, while the Cuda became the symbol of calculated, purpose-built dominance. What makes this rivalry even more special is that both cars shared similar power plants, yet delivered completely different results depending on design philosophy. This proves that quarter-mile performance isn't just about horsepower numbers, it's about how effectively a car uses that power when it matters most. Today, collectors and enthusiasts don't just look at these cars as investments or showpieces, they see them as mechanical legends forged on the drag strip. The value of a Hemi Cuda or a classic Challenger isn't only tied to rarity, but to the stories written in tire smoke and elapsed times. These cars represent a time when the quarter mile was the ultimate test, when bragging rights were earned at the strip, not online. As modern performance cars rely on computers and software to achieve speed, these classic muscle cars remind us of a raw, unfiltered era where skill and courage mattered just as much as horsepower. When you imagine these machines lined up under the lights, engines rumbling, crowd watching in silence, you can still feel the tension of those historic runs. That feeling is why these cars continue to dominate conversations decades later. So as this quarter-mile comparison comes to an end, one thing becomes clear: the Dodge Challenger delivers unforgettable presence and power, the Plymouth Cuda delivers ruthless efficiency and winning focus, and together they define what true American muscle was meant to be. The real winner isn't just one car, but an era that gave us machines built to live and die by the quarter mile. And now it's your turn to decide. If you could step back in time and line up on the strip, which legend would you trust to take you across the finish line first? What makes these quarter-mile legends even more impressive is the fact that they were built in an era without modern engineering shortcuts. There were no launch control systems, no traction management computers, and no electronic assistance to correct mistakes. Everything depended on mechanical grip, engine response, and the driver's ability to control raw power. When these cars lined up at the strip, every race was unpredictable, and that uncertainty is what made the quarter mile so thrilling. A perfect launch could turn an underdog into a winner, while a small mistake could cost the race entirely. The Dodge Challenger demanded respect because of its sheer power output, but that power also required skill to control, especially under hard acceleration. Meanwhile, the Plymouth Cuda rewarded precision, reacting quickly to driver input and translating every ounce of power into forward motion. This balance between chaos and control is what separates legendary quarter-mile cars from ordinary fast vehicles. Over time, these machines didn't just win races, they shaped the culture of American drag racing. Weekend racers, street enthusiasts, and professional drivers all looked to these cars as benchmarks of what straight-line performance should feel like.